highlight a very special Speedway rider, a two-time United States Speedway champion. He was the bad boy. His name is Steve Lucero. Steve was born June 29th, 1964 in San Pablo, California. San Pablo is in Northern California. And Steve, when he was a young boy, he learned to ride flat track TT. And he raced against many young stars like Randy Mamola and others. I raced Randy Mamola at Saddleback Park and he was good. One day while Steve was riding his flat track TT bike, a man saw how good a rider Steve was, a naturally gifted rider, and said, "Hey, I've got a Speedway bike. Do you want to ride it?" To his dad, and his papa said, "Okay, let's have it. Let's have a go at Speedway." And in Sacramento, California, on some track, it was raining really heavy that day. Steve Lucero rode his first Speedway bike. Steve probably rode a junior Speedway bike because he was a young kid. He was like 12 or something like that. And he rode in Northern California at San Jose, Napa, and Cal Expo. He rode those Northern California tracks and he did pretty well. By the age of 14, Steve rode his first Outlaw Speedway bike, the big 500cc bikes at the Hanford. F.R. Miller, do you know that guy? The old guy, he's passed away, rest in peace. He's like a Steve Evans today. He had the Outlaw tracks, and Steve Lucero went ahead and raced at the Outlaw track and probably did really well. Steve Lucero was called the bad boy. Why? Because he got in a lot of fights with riders, and especially Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz in the 80s. Bobby came back from Europe and they had it out. Bobby didn't back down to Steve, and Steve didn't back down to Bobby, and they had a lot of run-ins before Bobby Schwartz and Steve Lucero. And in the 90s, I had some run-ins with Steve Lucero also. I was racing one time, I was in the lead, last turn, last lap, and Steve Lucero was on the outside of me trying to pass me. And I cut Steve Lucero off, and I nearly crashed him. And after the races, he wanted to fight me. Steve Lucero was very mad. And I said, "You know what, Steve? I'm a bad boy too." 1985 was perhaps Steve's greatest year as a spear rider. He won his first of 4 California State Championships. He was good. And he raced 6 nights a week. They had 6 nights a week of Speedway back then. He won that competition against many guys who had multiple California State, United States Championships, and Steve beat them all.
My name's Steve Lucero, and I've been racing about 26 years.
Can you tell me about your highlights and things that stand out in your career that really bring back great memories?
Well, winning my first state championship, actually, back in 1985 was my first championship, so that was a big highlight. And then winning my first national was great. So after winning one championship, it's always nice winning some more.
After one of his championships, Steve Lucero was sponsored by Coors Beer. Brad Oxley was also sponsored by Coors Beer, and Coors Beer wanted a champion, and they got Steve Lucero for just 1 year. And after that 1 year, he stopped riding for the Coors Beer. Steve Lucero was also sponsored most of his career by Shoei helmets and Oakley goggles. Steve also won 2 United States Speedway Championships, 1988 and 1996. He was a great rider, and there's some really good riders back on those days, and Steve beat them all. He was a great rider for a one-night competition. He said if it was like a Grand Prix series, he wouldn't do that well, but one night, Steve Lucero went for it, and he was good. Steve also had a brief stint with Eastbourne and Wolverhampton in the British League. Also, Steve was in the 21 and under World Championship and was on the podium with 3rd place. It was Dennis Segallo, Siggy, who offered his motorcycle to Steve Lucero, and Steve kindly took it, and he did really well. He finished 3rd, was on the podium in the 21 under championship. At that time, Steve realized that how important it is to have good mechanical equipment and a good mechanic. Back a few years ago at the Pirate Speedway in San Bernardino, Steve had his last ride on a Speedway bike. He he had enough, though. I think that was it. They asked Steve if he would ride Speedway again in the old-timers ranks, and he said, no, I'm done. I want to ride my 450 in the dirt and have just fun. No more Speedway for Steve, the bad boy Lucero. Steve worked as a sales rep for a cheese factory for many years, and he lives in Winchester, California, over by Lake Paris, that area, Hemet. And he's a referee at Industry Speedway and some of the other tracks. I think Costa Mesa now too. He's a good rep. I actually raced when Steve Lucero was repping, and I liked him. He was one of the best reps that came along in years, in my opinion. He also said he liked Irwin Moon, the old Irwin Moon referee, because Irwin Moon, when you complained, he said, that's how I saw it and that's how I call it. Irwin Moon was a no-nonsense guy, and Steve Lucero is also a no-nonsense guy. Steve also has a special love for the Junior Speedway program. Why? Because he was a Junior Speedway rider also at one time. A little kid, a little 12-year-old kid. He can relate to them, and he's like a papa to some of these kids out there. It's really cool. He's helping those kids, and he's just doing a great job, really. Also, he has many hats over at the Industry Hill Speedway, the Grand. He's like the timekeeper when the races get over with. He's a paramedic. He's a first responder if somebody gets hurt. He says that it's nice that somebody that the injured riders know so he can go help them first. He knows a lot about Speedway, and Steve Lucero is just a great human being. Steve Lucero, the bad boy. He was a gifted rider, a two-time US Speedway champion. He was a great rider. We want to thank Steve Lucero for all the countless years of service he has given to the sport of Speedway. Now he's a referee, just doing a great job. So thank you so much for watching the Steve Lucero vlog. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate you watching the channel. So thank you so much. Have a great day.